Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Joe Salemi. I'm with DynaSCAPE Software, and today is the next installment of the Manage360 Masterclass, where it's our hope to help you get the most out of your landscape business operating system. Today's installment is webinar number 13, and we're going to look at connecting Manage360 to QuickBooks Desktop. So in this session, we're going to be looking at how to connect QuickBooks Desktop to Manage360. We're going to cover some of the things that you should know before getting started with the accounting connector, how to set it up, and how to use it. And we're lucky enough to have one of our great implementation and training specialists with us, Fabio Ronconi. Fabio, you're with us today.
Yeah, hi Joe.
Thanks. How you doing?
Good.
So one of the things that is always good to know is the importance of why even have accounting integration with a business operating system. Why would you want the two systems to talk to each other? And you know the lists of reasons are plentiful, and the amount of reasons are even more. But to highlight some of those, you want to reduce back office paperwork and the duplication of efforts. Ultimately, that's the goal. And by connecting your operating system like Manage360, that will do your estimating, job costing, and billing, to have your billing synced up with QuickBooks is very important to leverage those efficiencies by connecting the work that you've already done. You'll be able to keep all of your information in one place. For instance, seeing what invoices in Manage360 have been posted, what's paid or unpaid. You'll be able to track and monitor all of your billables in real time. That's highly important. And ultimately expediting the billing process. The faster you can get your invoices out, the faster you can get money in. Fabio, I think I'd like to hand it over to you so we can dive right in and you can show us how all of that works with connecting Manage360 to QuickBooks.
All right, no problem. Thanks, Joe. Just going to get my screen fired up over here. So yeah, so thanks. So again, like Joe said, today we're going to look at the accounting connector part of it. So and again, kind of focus on that bit of it of just setting it up. Like what again, things to know a little bit, a few things to know before you set it up, and then during the setup process. And then a lot of stuff is a lot of that kind of stuff is one time only. We just do it at the beginning. We're not doing it every time, but a lot of the setup stuff. Then once that has been set up, how do I use the accounting connector on like a day-to-day basis as well? So we'll start off kind of those are kind of what we're going to look at. Just the beginning kind of be focused on just the accounting connector itself, setting up, and then how do I use it to run as well. Now, one of the things that the accounting connector does, like Joe says, is that it's going to push invoices that I have in Manage360 to QuickBooks. Now, we are going to have a separate master class that's going to go into more detail on the whole billables and billing in Manage360. So today we're going to kind of keep it light on the billing in 360 part. I'll kind of touch on that a little bit, but we're going to have a separate master class for that as well. So first thing is, what do I do with this accounting connector? How do I get this started? So the accounting connector is a separate program, a very small application that initially you need to install. So you install it in the settings area. So I'll just kind of show you where that is. In Manage, there's a settings, which again, you probably guys have been to many, many times. In the settings area, down at the bottom, under billing settings, there's accounting settings link here. So this is with our new accounting connector. Go here. Now I'll go over a few of these as well, but basically this is where the initial installation happens from right down here. We download the connector. It's a very, again, pretty quick download. It'll do an installation, and then when the installation is done, it'll get right into, okay, start setting up the connector. So I'll get back into the connector itself, but I just want to go over a few of their settings while we're here. So there are some settings in here that also pertain to the connector as well on there. So basically, the couple that I want to show over here as well are things like create QuickBooks invoices in. So like we're saying, the main purpose, again, there's mapping between the customers in QuickBooks and our accounts and Manage, but at the end of the day, it's the invoices that we are pushing from Manage360 to QuickBooks. So this option here, what this allows me to do is that, where do I want to put that invoice in QuickBooks? So I have two choices. I can put it at the customer level. So this means in whatever the invoice is, it'll make that invoice. It knows the customer that's linked to, and in QuickBooks, it'll put that invoice directly below the customer. It's not going to create anything else. The other option is job, which in that case, when I have an invoice to push to QuickBooks, it knows the customer, but it also will then create a sub-record in QuickBooks for that specific job. So in that case, the invoices will go to jobs under the customer. So if I have a customer that has multiple jobs in Manage, then they will have multiple jobs in QuickBooks, and the invoices will be allocated to their proper job. I can still see a roll-up at the customer level, but basically the invoices go to the individual jobs. So you can choose either way. If you're more comfortable not having jobs, you can just put the invoices directly below the customer. That's fine. So we'll go into QuickBooks a bit later as well to kind of show you how that looks as well. So we have it at the job. Now, tied to that as well is if I'm making it in the job. So say I want to make the invoice, I want to make a job level in QuickBooks, then when do I want to make that job in QuickBooks? Now, the default way is when the invoice is made in Manage, when I push that invoice, then go ahead and make the job at that time. But you can also choose when the job is made, which means if I win an estimate, whether it's maintenance or construction, if I win that estimate, it turns into a job, then when the next time the sync tool runs, that's when you make the job. Now, there may not be an invoice in QuickBooks yet, but it'll create the job on the QuickBooks side for that. So those are the two kind of main things that are going to point back to QuickBooks and to how it is going to create the invoices and where it is going to create those invoices as well. Now, there's an invoice sync start date. Now, this date is configured by us as we go through the implementation of this with you guys, just so you know what it is. It's here. This basically means when we set this up, this is the date. Any invoices before this date, it's not going to try and push them to QuickBooks. It's going to ignore invoices before this date, even because they may have been done before as well on there. Email and print later. This is for the invoices themselves. If you want to have them have that flag checked in QuickBooks as well, you can set up the defaults in this also. But these are the settings within Manage360. So the installation itself starts here. Again, you can install it on more than one machine. That's fine. The thing is that the machine, you would install it on a machine that you typically use QuickBooks on. Because when the connector is running, QuickBooks also has to be open as well on that. So I'll come back when we talk about this a little bit more. But basically, on the connector itself, so like I said, the connector is a separate application that we run. After we've gotten past the setup, we run it to synchronize Manage360 and QuickBooks. So before we can talk, get into too much detail about the synchronization part, there is the setup component of it. Now, I have the connector tool open over here. I'll just pop it open for a second, and we'll talk a little about this. Now, it has a settings page, it has a synchronization page tab, and it has a mapping tab. The very first time you go in here, and again, you may have to come here again later, but you'll go to the settings tab of the connector so that you can tell it, essentially, you're telling it where my Manage database is and where my QuickBooks company file is on there as well. So those are two things you tell. Now, before we get into that, I just want to talk a little bit about, like Joe's mentioning, pre-things. So for our clients, for clients that already have Manage360 and they have a lot of accounts in 360, there is some things we want to consider on there as well. So basically, at the end of the day, we're going to map customers in QuickBooks with our accounts in Manage on there as well. So it's our active customers in QuickBooks with their accounts on Manage. So when I do that as well, so we have a process in here called auto mapping, which we'll get into a little bit as well. It looks at the information in both sides, and what it tries to do is that it looks at the name of the customer, the name of the account in Manage, the address of that customer in QuickBooks, and the address in Manage as well. So we try to help with the process of mapping them together by doing an auto map, but it is very strict on the names have to be exactly the same. The addresses have to be exactly the same. You know, otherwise we don't want to guess incorrectly and map two customers, you know, to the wrong one, and then we start posting invoices to the incorrect one. So we are very strict on the auto map part of it as well. So there is an auto map function, which I'll show you, but again, depending on the data quality, it might not do a great job. There'll be a lot of manual mapping involved. But one thing to help with that before you do this auto mapping is to look at your kind of customers in QuickBooks, your active ones, the ones in Manage. And again, if you guys, or if your company already has like a naming convention, the way things are entered, then that could very well, you know, be, there's not much data to clean up. It's pretty simple. But if not, we may have to spend some time doing that. Again, that way that'll pay dividends on the auto map side, because then things will be mapped quicker as well on there for that. Now, that applies to customers, vendors, and employees. So I'll go into a little bit of that as well, into a little more detail on those sections, just to give you an idea. That's kind of the beginning. You want to have name, address, kind of stuff mapped up exactly on there. Now, on the settings, before we get into the mapping, which is our second step here, this is, again, pretty straightforward stuff. We do, just so you know what it is, we do walk you through this with you and doing the initial configuration. So this is your Manage360 site. You don't need to put the whole URL in, just that, your username and your password. Now, just so you know, your username and password, in order to make the connection work, in order to use Accounting Connector, the username and password that you use, again, typically you're someone who's connecting to QuickBooks, you have to have at least one of the following security roles: administrator, owner, or the payroll/finance role. One of those three roles will allow the connector to be able to talk to QuickBooks and to manage properly on there as well. So again, you set up your Manage one. Now, if you do change your Manage password, that's when maybe you'll have to come back to here and adjust it as well for that. The QuickBooks side, that's for your QuickBooks company file. Now, I'll come back to that here. In the top, we have these two checkboxes: start on system startup, and again, you've probably seen that in other applications. When I start my computer up, automatically run this Accounting Connector. And the other one is running it. If I close it, if I X out of this, then keep it in the tray, minimize it to the tray. Now, I like to run it with both turned off, because if I want to run it, I'll go to my start menu, I'll make a shortcut on my desktop, run the Accounting Connector whenever I need it. And this one, when it's closed, when I click X, it'll actually close it out totally. And it works fine either way, but one thing to note, if you have this checkbox turned on, which is, again, fine, if you close it, you might have, oh, I've closed it off, you've forgotten it's down hidden in your tray. When you try to close QuickBooks, it's going to complain and be, oh, I can't close, something is still connected to me. So, like I said, either way works. I like to have them both turned off, just so I can know when I hit the X to close this, I'll actually fully close it as well. Now, with the QuickBooks company file, like this is managed usually pretty simple. QuickBooks company file, and again, it's usually fairly simple as well. There's a browse, which, you know, allows me to browse to my QuickBooks company file. Map drive, network drive, that's fine, as long as I can get to it on this machine as well. Now, if you're not sure of your the location of your company file, or you're just used to opening it, you don't remember exactly where it is, one thing to help with that, and this serves two purposes. Number one, remember where it is. Number two, this path here has to match exactly what QuickBooks is using as well. So if I go into QuickBooks and I have QuickBooks open over here, a quick way to get that path, again, if you know where it is, then absolutely no problem. You can just go to browse and find it. But if you're not sure where it is, in QuickBooks, you can hit the F2 key or the Control and number 1, and it'll bring up this window, which again will tell you right here, this is to keep this location. This is where the company file is located. So again, if you don't remember where it is, you can always go into QuickBooks, hit F2 or Control 1. It brings it up. And again, this is typically done during the beginning, during initial setup on there. But that's, if you know exactly where this company file, where it's located, because this string here, this path here has to match the path in the Accounting Connector over here as well. So it's exactly the same path as to where to find that file. Now, there is one thing that happens here the first time you're doing this. So when you've got the path, you click the login button. This is only on the first time I'm connecting. Any subsequent times, it's fine. The very first time we do this, you do need to be logged into QuickBooks as an admin on there. And again, like I said, it's only the one time. If you're always an admin anyway, that's fine. But the very first time doing an admin, because when you click the login button, what QuickBooks is going to do is that it's going to pop up a window saying, are you sure you want to allow this app to connect to QuickBooks? So again, you do need to be in QuickBooks because it's going to ask about allowing the connection to be made on that. Again, that's like I said, it's a one-time thing. And what that really entails in QuickBooks here, if I go into the preferences, is that in the integrated applications section, again, if you go here, just again, under company preferences, it's basically going to allow us, it'll add the DS Manage360 accounting connector to the allowed applications that can connect to Manage. But again, that is a one-time thing so they can connect to QuickBooks. It's a one-time thing. The only time you need to be an admin on QuickBooks. Once this is done, this is set inside of QuickBooks. Any subsequent time I try to connect, whether I'm on this machine or a different machine that I'm accessing, it knows that, oh yes, the Manage360 accounting connector, it is allowed to connect and talk to QuickBooks and give information there as well. So I think that's the first time only on there as well. Any subsequent times, your regular QuickBooks login will be fine on there. Now, so like I said, we do a lot of this stuff with you at the beginning to help connect. That's the initial part. So before we go to either of the other tabs, I have to have the settings. Number one, where's my Manage? Number two, where's my QuickBooks company file? Now, once that's done, before we jump into the synchronization, then we want to go to the mapping tab. So the mapping tab, this is where, the magic happens, as it were. We go in here, this is now telling Manage and QuickBooks, how things are connected together on there. Now, there are several things that can be mapped, and a lot of them are pretty simple. A couple of them will take longer, like the customers likely. So there's divisions that can be mapped, taxes, customers, employees, and suppliers and vendors and QuickBooks. Those need to be mapped first. Now, what the divisions and taxes, you have to map divisions before you can even run the sync on there as well. So the divisions themselves, so how it works, and I'll end up going through all of these as well. The divisions map is you're mapping your divisions in DynaSCAPE Manage360, and again, they're on the left side here. The right side, it is mapping to a service item in QuickBooks. So it's at a very high level. It is just this division maps to this service. Now, when you're doing this the first time, or if you add another division, or if we change a division, if we do something like that, you may have to remap this. This QuickBooks service item area, if you don't see anything here, you basically have to click directly across from the division in here, and then a drop-down list will appear where you can pick the specific service that is mapped to. Now, again, you may have a much, much larger list, which is fine. It's just mapping to specific service items in QuickBooks. And this is for when we create an invoice, the items on that invoice belong to that division. They will all be mapped to that particular service item as well. When you do this, or when you change anything, when this is done, at the bottom, there's a map button. You click on the map button, and it'll do the map, and in the very bottom corner, it's a little success, means that mapping was successful on there as well. So divisions, like I said, divisions have to be mapped before you can run a sync at all. Like you can't even, it needs to be done. Now, before we talk about the other ones here, like divisions is key, I want to go to the auto map. So like I was talking at the beginning, if you're Manage360, if you're brand new to Manage360 and you don't have a lot of accounts in 360, then the auto map is not, again, you don't need to worry about it as much because there's not yet things in Manage that we're mapping. But if you do have customers that are in Manage that are not in QuickBooks, or that are in both, and I want to make sure that the tool knows who's who, the auto map can help do that. So in the auto map, you can see there's three things that will map: customers, employees, and suppliers. And you can do one at a time, or you can do them simultaneously. What this is looking for, and again, this is basically you click it and it has to run, and it does, and it can take a while depending on how many customers, because it goes through basically every active customer, employee, and supplier in QuickBooks, and then looks for a match in Manage360. But the match has to be exact when it does the auto map. And it'll keep a running total at the bottom of how many it's mapped, 1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,000, 2, 3, and keep counting up until it's done. And it can take upwards of 15, 20 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on your machine and depending on how many it has to go through on there as well. But it just, again, it's always good to run this, especially if you've done some data cleanup. That way, a lot of the mapping can be done. The idea is that if a customer is in Manage already and in QuickBooks already, I want to make sure that the tool knows that they are the same person. So when we start putting invoices against that customer's work, it's going to the correct customer in QuickBooks as well. So the auto map is, again, one of the first things that we do. And you can run it multiple times. If you've made some data changes, you can run it again. It'll keep trying to map. Basically, I said active customers in QuickBooks, active employees, active suppliers. It is going to try and map them to what is in Manage360. Again, the name of the customer has to match exactly. Then also the address is also key as well. Again, because we're erring on the side of caution here. We do not want to inadvertently map someone because we think it must be this person, and then we have the wrong person mapped. So even things like the name of the street, it gets very specific about things that need to be mapped during that process. So that's the auto map. Like I said, you can run it. It can take some time. It'll go through and do the mapping for you. Now, once the auto map is done, there may be things that need to be mapped manually, which again, that's oftentimes the case. So again, typically this initial mapping part is usually one of the longer things to do, but it's fine. Now, I'll talk briefly about taxes and then get into the customers and the employees and suppliers like we had here. So on taxes, now the taxes, basically if you charge sales tax in Manage360, so on the invoice there'll be a separate sales tax line item, then you have to map it here. If you do not charge a sales tax in Manage360, there's not additional, you don't see that sales tax line on the estimate or on the invoice, then you don't need to worry about this at all, then it's fine, you don't need to map it. Now, one thing that we do have, again, it works exactly like the divisions. I have to go across, this is the sales tax it's currently in use, I need to map it to my QuickBooks tax. Now, one thing it does check, if I just it's not going to let me map my 6% managed sales tax to my 5.45 QuickBooks sales tax. If I try to do that, it's going to complain and say, no, you can't map these. The rates have to be the same on there. So you have to map it to a 6% tax that I have in QuickBooks. And again, this is sales tax specific. If you don't charge sales tax and Manage, then you don't have to worry about this tab as well. And when it's done, hit map. If it's fine, you get a little success button down there. And again, I didn't actually change it, so it remembers what it was before on there. Now, if you want to refresh it, if you've added something to Manage, or if there's another thing that I have to check, you can hit refresh, and it will then go and re-pull the data again on there. The other three, now the next three, customers, employees, suppliers. So the customers will take potentially, it can take a little bit of time to load on there, because when we go here, it is basically loading. The left side is the QuickBooks information. It is loading that directly from QuickBooks when I go to this tab. So it is basically showing you these are your active QuickBooks customers right here. So this is where they are. Here are the QuickBooks customers. Now, the right side is these are your managed customers. Now, all three of these, customers, employees, suppliers, they all work in a very, very much the same way on there as well. And that the left is QuickBooks, right is Managed. Now, also on the left-hand side here, at the bottom of all three of them, I have an option to choose unmapped people or mapped people. So I'm going to go to unmapped. So typically, after we do the auto mapping, then you want to come to this unmapped, the customers unmapped, also for employees and also for suppliers, and go here and do this from here. So this unmapped list, again, at the very beginning, this unmapped list may be fairly long. And for example, if we click on a name on this side, what it does on the Manage side is that it says, okay, these are likely who this person should map to. So if I ran AutoMap and I couldn't find this, again, we can look at it and be like, well, the name's exactly the same. The information looks pretty good. Why is it not mapping? One of the things is that, for example, the address here, I have road fully spelled out versus the short form here. So it doesn't know, again, like I said, we err on the side of being cautious because we don't want to inadvertently map someone automatically. If we know, in this customer mapping side and unmapped, we know, well, this is going to take a little bit of time to go through, okay, what person in QuickBooks, who are they in Manage on there as well. Now, if they're new, like this, again, for example, this, if I click the new, it's like, no, it's neither of these two. So what it tries to do, it tries to give you a best guess on here as well. And it orders it by likelihood that it's that person as well. If it's new, you can click Add as New if you would like to, or when you run the synchronization tool, it will add any active customers, or will try to add any active customers from QuickBooks that are not mapped. It will try to add them into Manage automatically. So I don't have to hit Add as New, Add as New, Add as New in here as well. It will try to add them in. But if you're here, you can do that as well. So in this one, I know this is Add as New, and I'll leave this one. I'll run the synchronization tool, show you how that works. But if I know that, okay, this one, yeah, this one should have mapped, looks exactly the same, it's the same person. If it is, and again, this is for customers, but this applies also for employees and suppliers. Basically, we click down here on the map button on the Manage side, and we're telling it, this is basically telling the connector to link these two together so that whenever I have an invoice in Manage for this person, it is going to go to the right side on there as well, going to the right information in QuickBooks. So I'll click the map button. Now, every time you're doing this, when you click the map button, it is mapping it in real time. It is going to the database, it's updating the database directly, so it does take, a little bit of time to refresh. It has to go back, read all the QuickBooks information again, update it with the newly mapped information, and now that person is no longer on my QuickBooks unmapped side here. Now, if I think that I don't think someone is mapped correctly, I want to make sure that they're mapped right. If I click on the mapped option here, this is now going to show me these are my QuickBooks people that have already been mapped. So if I click on their name, it will then tell me, oh, this one is mapped to this in Manage360 on there as well. And you can see, okay, and then this, it's all gone there as well. That's where they're mapped. So it knows these are together. Now, if for some reason, again, whether through AutoMap or whether I inadvertently clicked on the wrong map button, if I go in here, I notice that, oh, this is not actually correct, I can click the unmap, and that will remove the link between the two, and then I will have to remap them at some point as well on there. So it is possible to unmap them. So on this side, you're looking at your QuickBooks one, using them to kind of manage. Again, this is your active QuickBooks customers. Now, on more of a day-to-day side, so this is, again, at the very beginning, these are my people in QuickBooks, and they're already in Manage. They're in both places, and you want to put them together. If a person exists in Manage, but they're not in QuickBooks yet, then you don't need to worry about the mapping. That person or that account in Manage is not going to be pushed to QuickBooks, again, until they have a one job or an invoice. So I may have someone in Manage, we may have done a couple opportunities, made a couple estimates, but if we've never invoiced them, they're never going to QuickBooks on there as well. That's the whole thing. So once we've done the mapping, it's just that if they're already in QuickBooks, I want to map them. But going forward, new people, they go into Manage, you do an estimate, we get the work, great. Then eventually we'll invoice them, that'll automatically add it to QuickBooks as well. If I do choose to add them to QuickBooks manually, then I want to come into this mapping and do this manual mapping to make sure that Jim Smith in QuickBooks is Jim Smith in Manage360 on there. But otherwise, like I said, typically add them to Manage, they'll only be pushed over when there's an invoice or a job on there. Now, I'll go into employees and suppliers where you can see that, but pretty much these are all kind of the same functionality there. You can see my employees, again, I have a mapped, I have an unmapped. If they're none, all employees are mapped, that's fine. That's, again, if I need to change one, I can on there. And I'll talk in a little bit of a second, something else here. Now the suppliers, the one thing with the suppliers that is key is that, or not key, but is that very useful, is that in QuickBooks, you're likely going to have more suppliers than you need in Manage. So in QuickBooks, we only sync the suppliers that have been mapped. So in QuickBooks, if I have vendors in QuickBooks that are not, I don't need them in Manage, they're my cell phone supplier, whatever, they're not in Manage, I don't use them to estimate and manage. I don't need to map those. They're not going to push those. Those aren't going to be pushed to Manage. We don't want to add unnecessary suppliers to your Manage side on there as well. So for the suppliers, vendors, only the mapped ones are going to be pushed from QuickBooks to Manage on there. Now, with the employees, so just in general, with customers, employees, and suppliers. So in Manage, for example, I may have an employee, Dave Jones, but I also may have a customer called Dave Jones. And in Manage, that's totally fine. The employee name can be the same as a customer name. In QuickBooks, that's not allowed on there as well. So you may run into synchronization errors when it's trying to push a customer from Manage to QuickBooks when it says, oh, that customer name's already in use. If you go to QuickBooks, no, I don't have that customer, you always want to check the vendors and the employees list as well, because in QuickBooks, those things have to be unique also. Now, once I've done the mapping here, then I can go to the synchronization tool side, synchronization tab. So on the more day-to-day level, the synchronizing is where you are going to be typically doing this. Oh, it's that time I want to run the sync. I created some invoices, man, I want to run the sync. You can run the sync whenever you'd like. Basically, what it is, it checks Manage and it checks QuickBooks, what has changed since the last time I was run, and it tries to incorporate those changes. So if I made an address change on a customer in Manage, but there's no invoices, I can still run the sync and it will still say, oh, this is a new address now, I got to push this over to their side, and it'll do that as well. So again, you don't only have to run the sync when invoices are involved, but again, you can run it when you need to, and basically it checks both sides, which one is changed last, okay, I need to update it on the other side as well for that. Now, you can see here, then there's a log on this side of all the times it's been run. Now, again, it's just been run recently, because when we mapped it, that's doing a little mini synchronization. That's not a full-on thing, it just says, oh, those two are mapped together, so it knows those two guys are together as well. Now, the first time you do this, after you've done the mapping, the sync may take a while, because there's a lot of things that need to be synchronized, because everything's been freshly mapped on there as well, so it might take a bit of time to be synchronized. If it's run on a fairly regular basis, it doesn't take as long to run every time. If there's a lot of invoices that are going over, it may take a few minutes to get all the invoices over. If there's not much changing, it could be done in a couple seconds on there as well. But this tool has to be run whenever we want to push changes from Manage to QuickBooks or pull changes from QuickBooks to Manage on there as well. So again, you do need to run this tool beyond just in Manage posting an invoice. I'll do that as well. But so when I run the sync here, like I said, the very first time we run it, could take a while, and I've run it already today, so it shouldn't take too long. Couple things it does. All the mappings, it'll update anything like that. Any new invoice is pushed over, but also the first time you run it, any active customers in QuickBooks that are not mapped, it is going to put them into your Manage customer list as well. So I'm going to click Sync, and again, you see connecting Manage to Manage, it's checking again. So it's using the settings to check, and then it's going back and forth. Like I said, it's not going to take particularly long. So anyway, now it's done. Now, a couple things you notice here. In this case, it started, tried to put, so it's like a couple things to look on here. So it tells you where it's coming from, what it is, what particular file, and if there's an issue on there as well. Now, you may have ones that are a bunch of green, which is fine. You can hide the successful ones and just show the errors on there as well. So a couple errors, like for example, this is coming from Manage. So from Manage, we're trying to go into QuickBooks, trying to put an invoice into QuickBooks. The job cannot be found. Likely, again, the most likely cause of something like this thing, and I'll go over a couple of the errors, and typically it's like the job cannot be found. That means that at some point, this connector created a job in QuickBooks that is now no longer in QuickBooks. So best thing to do, if you're not sure the errors, I'll give our support team a call. We can help resolve as many of those as possible. Some of them are just requires to reset some of the mappings. But again, if you're not sure, always let us know what they are. But again, so you know the job, that's likely the issue, that there's supposed to be a job, there was a job that this invoice belonged to, but now in QuickBooks, that job isn't there anymore. The other one here, this one says coming from accounting. That means this one is coming from the QuickBooks side. So it's trying to add this customer, Jeremy Baramy here, to Manage360. But it's saying, well, I can't because I don't have a state or a province in 360. So this is, again, this is a fairly typical beginning synchronization error that's in there, because in QuickBooks, you can make a new customer with no address and nothing else, and it's fine. But Manage requires, at the very least, a state in there as well, or a province. So to fix this error, super simple. So I'll go into QuickBooks, just to give me one, and I'll find that customer here in QuickBooks, and I'll just edit them, and I'll just put a state in here as well. Hit OK, and don't do anything else in there. Now I will talk about this layout just in 1 second as well here. So if I go back and run this, I hope I put that in correctly as well. Again, it's going to connect to both, synchronize, check, apply changes from one to the other, update them, and go back and changes the other way as well on there. Yeah, it didn't like that either, because I didn't probably type the whole name of the state, and I just tried to do a shortcut on there. Still complaining about that state. Doesn't like me very much. Now, I'll go and fix that one. Now, a couple things I want to show you as well. Go back into QuickBooks. So you can see this will keep, it keeps trying. It'll keep, so if I have an error, the errors will keep, it'll still try them again. No, same way, try it again. It'll keep trying all that information in there as well. Now, in QuickBooks, so on the QuickBooks side, just this customer list here, just so we can talk about that job versus invoice in the job or invoice in the customer. If the invoice is in the job, then you can see I have the customer name, and then I have the job name here as well. So these jobs will be automatically created when I post the invoice. So when I have that setting turned on to create invoice in a job, it will create the job level in QuickBooks. So you may have, a customer with one job, customer may have multiple jobs on there as well, but it will create the job level in QuickBooks. Now I'm looking at this in the hierarchical view, which I find easier to navigate, but you can look at this in the flat. And again, all it's doing is it'll have customer name, job name, customer name, job name. So again, if a customer has 4 or 5 jobs, you'll see customer, all in this flat view. It looks like there's a lot of, but that's how it'll enter the data in. Customer name, job name, customer name, so it'll create a sub-level. I like looking in hierarchical view so I can kind of see customer, there's the jobs. Now, another example, if we have a customer that has, the billing accounts when Manage, we said, oh yes, this customer, I'm billing a different account in Manage, then what I'll have is this is the main billing account. This is where this is the account where we're doing the work. Then if I had a job below here, it would then create another level below here for the job. So the top level is where the bills are going to at the high end on there as well for that. So it will put that information into there also. Now, again, you can, like I said, so that's what it looks like. So you can flip this view, hierarchical or flat, but if you have jobs, this is what you'll get. If you don't have jobs, then all you'll have is the customer, and then every invoice is directly below there, no job information, like no sub jobs on there as well for that. Now, how do I get the information from Manage in the QuickBooks? Again, you run the sync tool, but now what is it syncing? So again, I'll go into Manage for a second here. So in Manage, and like I said, we're going to have a separate session on the billables component, but I do want to get into just kind of touch on a little bit so you kind of know what's going over there. So under production, there's a billing section. Again, you guys have probably all been in here. So the billing section is broken up into 2 different sides, the 2 different tabs. The billables, these are things that I can bill now. They've either been, again, if it's a construction job, it's been marked as ready for billing, or if it's a change order, it's been marked as ready for billing and construction, automatically shows up here. Also, if it's maintenance, visit's been done. If it's a per visit account, then the per visit billing shows up. If it's periodic if it's an installment client and it's that time and it's that date, then the installment billing shows up here as well. So these are things, the billables, these are things that you can invoice as of right now. Now, down the line, like I said, you guys can, again, you can make multiple views, you can filter by division, you can filter by billing type, only show me custom construction stuff, only show me per visit things. You can filter this to invoice what you want at any given time. Now I'll make one invoice here, so I'll take the first one, click on it, and again, you can make invoices. You can select all of them and do all invoice on there as well. That's fine. Also, I'll just do the one, create the invoice. The first step is I want to create this invoice to send over. So I create invoice. I'm gonna make the invoice here. Now, whenever you make an invoice, if you're in the billable section, it automatically goes to the Invoices tab, and it automatically selects this particular view, Invoices created today. So again, doesn't mean that if you're wondering where everything went, you can still choose a different view, but it automatically just goes to Invoices created today. So when an invoice is made, it gives you a number, the date, the job, who the account is, and the status is new, and it's unposted on there as well. So to get this now to QuickBooks, we have to post it. Now, even though we post it, we still need to then run the accounting connector tool. And I can do it right afterwards, or I can do it later. That's fine. I can post a couple, whatever kind of process. If you want to do it, again, typically I will post all my invoices from here, then open up the tool, sync, and then they'll all automatically be pushed to QuickBooks. So I'm going to click on to post it. Again, I have to choose one, or I can choose all of them again if I have a whole bunch. Again, you can also make views to filter specific days only, do that as well. Click post invoices, and now it'll tell you this one be posted. Okay, so I hit post in here to confirm that. I hit cancel and it won't do anything. Hit post, and now it's like, great, that's been flagged as posting, but you have to still run the sync to complete the process. So basically this just tells it I'm supposed to go to QuickBooks, but I'm not there yet. So in my Invoices tab, I can see this information. So again, with the new accounting connector, the status for ones that are flagged as posted, the status is automatically unpaid, just because it's unpaid. This posted, but at the end I have a little synchronization thing. And this tells me that this one is waiting. So until I run the synchronization tool again, this is going to be waiting to go over there as well. So basically now I could go in, yes, I'm done this, pop open the accounting connector, hit sync again, and again, this invoice 3444 should now be sent over to manage to that account, to that job on there. So I can see again, 3444 got added, updated. I still have the same 2 errors before. I can't find this job, which is fine. And Jeremy Baramy he's still bugging me over here. But basically, now that that's over, so if I go back here, I just refresh this view here. That invoice is now, it's still unpaid because it's in QuickBooks, but now that the sync, it's now synced successfully. So if I go to QuickBooks and Haley Casey here, pop open QuickBooks. Use a search here. Fail to search because I don't like that. Okay, Casey. Spell her name. Wow. Spelling skills have gone out the window. Casey. Haley. There she is there. And I'm looking at the flat view. So here's her main. This is her main customer level, and then below it, Haley Casey, colon J34 Casey residence spring summer. So it's now created a job. If I look at it again, the hierarchical view, again, this is what it looks like. It's now I have this job, and within that job, I have 2 invoices on there as well. So it's automatically pushed that over like that on there as well. And made, if the job wasn't there, it would have made it. The job was there, great. It just adds the invoice to it as well. Now, in QuickBooks, but in Manage, that's unpaid. So now basically in QuickBooks, we'll manage the paying. So I'll open up that invoice, and you'll see that basically the mapping, it knows that it goes to that same service level from the mapping. It has a description, installments. If I had any other, information on the invoice, if I had put some comment lines, they would also come across here as well for that. But basically, if I want to apply a payment to this particular invoice here, then I can do that as well on there. So you can print out this the other spot over here, like I'm gonna go back out of this one. You can now, you can print the invoice from here. You could also print it from the other one as well on there. Just hit save and close on that guy for that. Now, you payment again. I'll just do a quick one here for this one as well. Again, if I'll use a check example like here as well. Check number 1233 on there as well. Payment amount, again, it can be for the full amount. Because I'm doing a payment here, then there's 2 invoices. It's going to assume that for both. You can just put, I'll put an amount in here just so I can have it in there. 1,500 on there as well. Leave it as underpayment. That's fine on there as well. Save and close this thing on there. So save and close. So now if I look at the first invoice, it's paid. If I go to the second invoice, it's not fully paid yet. There's still a balance due. And again, this is QuickBooks is excellent for handling all of this. So I'm trying to try that. Do I want to do this now? I'm going to run the tool again. We're going to run the sync tool again, just to. Again, you don't have to run it after you apply every payment, but you can run it periodically. But this is one of the things that it'll pick up. It'll pick up the fact that the invoice that I know about, it's been changed on there as well. So basically, 3428 coming back from the accounting has been updated. So is 3444 also been updated. So now when I go back into manage, again, I'll just refresh this view over here. That status for 3444 has changed to partially paid on there as well. If I go to that job, for example, on the job, then I go into the billing for the job. This one is paid still as well. This one is unpaid. This one is partially paid on there. So again, this status, this is one of the things that update when the sync tool runs, it'll update that information as well. Now, I'm just going to pop back into billing here. So I'm looking at invoices created today. We also have some views in here which can help again if there's issues with the synchronization. So there is a built-in view that is invoices with sync issues. So basically this will also show me any invoices that have this red issue. There's some error happening here as well for that. So otherwise, again, if you look at all posted invoices, you can see the gray, they're all posted successfully, but the red indicates that particular invoice, and that's 3440, that's the one that's still popping up in the accounting connector. So until I address that, it will continuously try to post it and continuously update an error as well on there. So basically, as I said, like again, the accounting connector, again, it's trying to keep the customers in sync with each other. It knows who it belongs to, but what gets pushed over once the initial mapping is done, then what gets pushed over are these invoices. Whether they create jobs or not in QuickBooks, again, that's a setting you can control in Manage360 as well. But otherwise, again, that's the kind of the accounting connector in a nutshell, I guess, or in a very big nutshell. I don't know on there. So it just allows you to kind of see that information on there. Now, like I said, we are going to go into the billing in more detail on there as well. Like we have a separate master class just to kind of cover the billing and filtering and sorting and when to create the billing on there as well, and probably just kind of touch on the accounting connector as well. But like the accounting connector, you can run it every night if you want. If there's nothing been posted, that's fine. It'll still check if any differences are. You can run it once a week and run it whenever you do the posting. It just, whenever it runs, it has to check the differences between what's different in Manage with these accounts I know, what's different in QuickBooks. Now, if I add a new customer into QuickBooks without adding them in Manage, then when I run the connector, it's going to try and push this active customer into Manage. Again, on the Manage side, they don't get pushed to QuickBooks until there is a job or an invoice on there as well for that. So hopefully I provided a little bit of insight here. I'm just going to pop back to the PowerPoint here. Again, if you have questions, the best thing to do, like, get in touch with our support guys. If you guys seen this and you don't have the new accounting connector, we can give you a hand with that as well. Also, like I said, if you're running into some issues with the sync tool, we can help troubleshoot them as well. Like it might be, you have to set an address correctly, or you have to unmap something, or maybe we have to unmap something on there as well. We can help you through some of the errors that you're having on there as well with the accounting connector also. Again, support at DynaSCAPE.com or 1-800-710-1900 extension 1. No problem for that on there. Also, learn how to use PowerPoint would be nice too. Now, again, I've recorded this session. Just like this, all the other ones are all going to be located on the same spot as well for that. So they'll all be there later, maybe later this evening, early tomorrow, again, once we get it edited on there as well. And then next week, right now, we're going to look at next week getting into some information in the cost book. Kits. I set them up, reasons to use the kits, how useful the kits can be on there as well. So thanks for joining, and we'll hope to see you guys again next week there. Thanks very much.